Hey there, guys. It's felt like over the past few years, there has been a strong and direct conflict between the two sides of the internet. At first, I thought it was purely just political, like Democrat versus Republican or liberal versus conservative. I've now come to the idea that it is more grounded than that. What I think it truly is would have to be the traditional worldview versus the progressive worldview, and their drive to eradicate and badmouth each other. They've come to host some of the biggest platforms, or if anyone has an opinion on these platforms, they're expected to pick a side. What I want to do is explain the conflict, show the flaws and good qualities of both sides, mostly the flaws, then explain what I think could be done, or at least just express my thoughts on the silly culture war we all seem to be dragged into. The first movement I want to speak on is the progressive movement, also known as the libtard woke snowflakes. This movement started with great intentions and made powerful positive changes in the last few decades. The root of its ideas, I would assume, have been around for a while, but the term woke and the radical ideas I'm going to focus on started in 2014, alongside the initial BLM movement, also in 2014. The term stay woke was used to try to have white people or anyone who was stated to have privilege to recognize and acknowledge that privilege. It was a good blanket term that really encompassed everything regarding social issues of racial discrimination and any sort of social injustice happening predominantly in America. This was a big talk of modern news at the time, but what pushed it further into social commentary and online discourse was the Me Too movement, which did start in 2006 and blew up on the foundation of this woke culture in 2017 following the massive case of Harvey Weinstein. While also being co-signed by a multitude of huge celebrities, the movement had a significant impact by adding women's rights into the fold, which made the woke culture not just about racial discrimination, but now just about injustice that was happening to anybody. This culture and way of thinking quickly became the standard way of thinking in a vast majority of popular media and in all liberal or left circles. Now that was the start of the movement and way of thinking, which I believe was well-intentioned and did a lot of good to point out some underlying injustices that have been happening within our country for some time. Where the problem occurs for me and many others is the radicalization and the overcorrecting the people on this side push and strive for. It often feels like this isn't a pursuit of justice and fairness, but a way of life to achieve virtue and to feel better than others. The people who participate apply victimhood to any group they want, creating constant divides within our society by using hateful and exclusionary tactics to make people feel bad for not being knowledgeable or just not going along with whatever these people say. It's more than just the fact they go out of their way to start conflicts, but they often participate in the very same behavior that they say they are against, often using very strong generalizations about groups of people and making blanket claims about people with no evidence. An example of this is how anybody who is rich or white is now subject to any sort of hateful rhetoric for that fact. Even worse, they will often go after marginalized groups like black people and gays if they don't align politically with them, dehumanizing them by saying they are just brainwashed and hate themselves. There's a strong sense of superiority with a lot of these radical liberals, thinking that all these social fights need to be won by them, and everyone are these victims that need their help, when in reality, nobody sees race and perpetuates hate more than these people. A huge amount of their identity rides on the culture war that is waged today. Now, the other radicalized group is the anti-woke truthers who have stemmed from other political movements like QAnon and the Trump campaign. There's also a lot of people who are adjacent to the movement but don't fully endorse it. Think Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson types. Now, the main spark of these radical groups started as an opposing force to the group mentioned earlier. But during the first few years of their start, they were often pushed down, told not to have an opinion because of their privilege, and because they're white, and a plethora of other excuses. This only emboldened them more, causing them to not want anything to do with the woke movement, creating a major rift with the mainstream media, but still also being majorly censored from the mass media. That was until Trump's campaign, where he seemed to be taking this woke thing head on, and the rest has been history. During the 2016-2019 era, they were mostly an online force, being very vocal but still not the most prevalent power online, where this change was the 2020 election, when the tides of social justice turned for a lot of people. It seemed most were catching on to the woke movement, going farther and farther into insanity, and to combat this, the anti-woke group went just as far. That's where you see these super radical groups that were born from, combating Antifa and the BLM riots. Now that was more or less how this group started and became as big as it is today. Almost just as big as the liberal woke group. At this point in time, it seems like the right-leaning movement is almost as big as the woke group and just as vocal. They are known to be so far gone on any topic, chalking everyone's problems up to either a huge conspiracy of the deep state Jewish people or divine spirit war. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is ever simple with them. The same way everything is the patriarchy and white supremacy with the woke side, everything is the hidden cabal with this side. And the false idolization within this movement is actually insane. Treating Trump like a God-gifted angel towards Earth, in their eyes he could do no wrong. When he accomplishes something, it's because of the power of God and to do the right thing. If he fails, then it was the devil and the deep state rigging everything against him. They come to these conclusions way before ever looking at the evidence. And when you already have the answer you want in your mind, no amount of evidence can change how you see a conflict. A big thing that this movement champions is free speech, which, to give credit where it's due, they support it heavily, and I love that aspect about them. But a negative that comes from cultivating a community like that is that they have no filter within this community. What I mean by this is there are a lot of dark roots to the conspiracy side of the group, usually coming down to the Jews controlling everything or race realism. These are really degenerate ideals that don't really help society in any way. Another group that lives within this larger one is just genuine racists, so that sucks too. Now, there are so many similarities you can draw with these movements in regards to their positives and their negatives. One of my favorite, very surface level fallacies that a dumb guy like me can recognize is how the respective sides are always right and the other is always wrong. In no conflict in history, except for a few exceptions, has there been one side that every mini battle and difference in opinion goes in their favor. Where you really see this take place is in any topic that involves Trump. You can immediately see how partisan people really are. What I mean is, think about the last time someone on the alt-right has ever criticized Trump or just downright did not agree with something he did or stood behind. Now think of the same thing on the opposite side with the woke side hating him. It just doesn't track that on both sides the guy is either a saint or a devil. There's no reasoning going on in these groups, because you can see this behavior with everything they disagree about, not just Trump. Now another thing they share is this intense audience capture. If you know what audience capture is, you may be thinking that it can only happen to major influencers, but it can happen to anyone, and it often does. Now what audience capture is, it is a phenomenon that describes how people compete in a marketplace based on how they think others prefer them. This can be a massive problem for big creators, creating echo chambers where only like-minded ideals get pushed, causing an intense radicalization within the community. But where I think this is even worse is with everyday people like you and me. I feel nowadays on social media, people won't say their true opinions or worldviews because of the fear of going against whatever group they feel they align with. Now, where the real problem is for the reasonable people who disagree with aspects of both sides. When you disagree with them both and speak out about it, you get exiled from both and face the wrath of two radicalized groups spewing baseless talking points at you. Because with both sides, there is no disagreement. To disagree is to put people in harm's way, and there's no middle ground, no common understanding. If you disagree, you are simply part of the problem and they must condemn you. Now, what is there to be done about this problem I've laid in front of you? Well, the first thing you could do is turn your phone off and go outside. But besides that, we just all need to get real comfortable with the fact that we are gonna disagree. And that doesn't make people bad. The demonization of both sides is doing nothing but bad things. All these people think ridiculing and stirring hate for their cause is helping. It's not. Trying to make people feel bad isn't helping the kids in Gaza who are dying. The Instagram posts don't help. It just makes these problems bigger. The rally at the Capitol didn't help America become more free. All these groups just doing this for the sake of finding purpose isn't helping. Just have a normal discourse and learn to understand and love everyone. And be based.